Continuing from previous seasons, the raid at the Hudson Bay cult conducted by Carnis, the secret organization attempting to expose the truth behind the Vita Carnis species, was successful. They managed to capture and contain the singularities and expose this new global order that worked in favor of the Carnis species and diminished the impact they had on the population, especially the encounters with mimics. With the singularities now contained, Carcass began to run some experiments in them, confirming what we already knew about them. Floating spheres composed of a glossy material suspended in the air by an unknown mean, and emit strange yet constant electromagnetic signals. Due to their apparently fragile nature, they choose not to take samples. You wouldn't want to break those valuable alien balls, so they opted for other types of testings. They first put a living cow in the same room as the singularity for 48 hours. This didn't give many results, aside of an unsettled cow, so they decided to put in a dead cow, and what happened next was very unexpected. Instead of decomposing, the body was transmutated into a pile of craw. You know, those fleshy tendrils that look like raw ground meat. This didn't show any other anomalous behavior, apart from a tendency to preferably grow towards the security cameras. This led to another experiment. 3 samples of craw were placed on a controlled surface to measure their growth pattern. The first one spread just like any other wild species. The second grew around the obstacles presented to it. And for the third sample, this was placed against a turned-on radio. This time, the crow ignored completely its normal growth pattern, choosing to go directly towards the device, enveloping it to then resume its normal pattern. In conclusion, the crow seems to be attracted to radio waves. Any kind of radio wave. Maybe this was the reason why they've grown around the security cameras in the first place. The following experiment was carried out in the trimmings, the disgusting and somehow cute flesh turtles. It is worth mentioning that they're using a combination of stop motion and puppets to animate the trimmings. You gotta give Darian some credit for that, you know? Anyways, they were investigating the social behavior of the trimmings. This time they were running the experiment of the negative and positive reinforcement. A trimming was put inside a metal box. Upon hearing a affirmative sound, he was given a treat, and when hearing a negative noise, it was sprayed with cold water. Oddly enough, the specimen responded very well to the stimuli, with an almost human reflex, I would say. He was then released with the rest of trimmings in captivity, and when the sounds were played, they all reacted at the same time, demonstrating that they are highly sociable creatures, since all of them acted in unison upon hearing the noise. But another researcher wanted to go a step further, even though this might not make any much sense. Near the facility there was another group of trimmings that haven't had any contact with those that were in captivity. The sounds were then played, and these reacted too, showing that they're not only highly social creatures, but they seem to function as a hive mind, and that it only took one member of the species to experience something for the entire group to be aware of that something. An experience lived by a single trimming is passed to the rest of the species, no matter what they are. Well, that's actually an exaggeration. Maybe this is just limited to the radio waves, you know? The following video continues with more experiments in the Carnis species. This time they were testing the limits of the meat snake. They wanted to see how big they could get being fed with enough food. After 3 weeks of force feeding with a mechanism that forced it to stay in one position, a sample of its skin was taken. It had the ability to withstand extreme temperatures, perhaps too extreme, surpassing the melting point of tungsten without losing its elasticity. The experiments continued like this until the snake simply escaped. She escaped doing mitosis. This was new. They suspended the test for now, until they figured out what happened here. After this, we see a report on the mimics, and I want you to remember the name of this doctor. He was researching the behavior and life cycle of mimics, from the early stages, from the chrysalis, and when they reached adulthood. It mentions that the mimics they had in captivity died of starvation, and those they captured while being adults maintained their usual behavior until they too died of starvation. The adult mimic only feeds on human flesh, so this was to be expected. It also mentions their ability to bend and hide inside furniture and very narrow spaces. At the end, it shows us the security footage of the singularity containment cell. We only heard the staff in charge of cleaning the room stumbled suddenly and apparently he broke his leg, and the singularity gets out of control. The next video is about the singularity and that apparently containing an alien lava lamp was not an easy task. They tried to send armed personnel to the containment area, but the psychic attacks and noises of the thing threw them away. They thought that maybe, just like any other species of Vita Carnis, this could respond differently to radio waves. So they tried something different with the intention of communicating with it. And surprisingly, this worked. The researchers could communicate with the singularity. They discovered that they communicated with each other. The main singularity is V-1, who was particularly interested in the radios. When they asked what was his connection with the other species of Vita Carnis, it only says that create and feed. And although the scientists do not seem to understand what it's saying, I think it's pretty obvious that it refers to the fact that they are in charge of creating the species of Vita Carnis. We already see what happened to the cow, right? This of course means that the research was successful, and they even scheduled a meeting with some agents of the United Nations. But when the day of the meeting arrived, the singularity began to act strangely, emitting a lot of interference, and when the agents were presented to the project, the singularity wanted to communicate directly with them, offering to work together on a plan that would benefit them both. And as you might remember, it's obvious that the global government are working together with the Carnis species, covering up the mimic attacks and hiding the true danger they posed, so nothing good is going to come out from this. Now, there are a few details and transmissions and some Easter eggs between the tapes, besides of what an elder trimming is supposed to look like, if that makes any sense. Some of these talk about filters and that some things may get past the filters. It is possible that the janitor came in with a wound under his leg, even just a small drop of blood exposed. This was used by the singularity as food to create some crow. This is how the janitor broke his leg. His muscles and tendons were transmutated into crow. The last video on the list is called Terminal Rally, and it's about a Carcass researcher, the same guy who was conducting the research on the mimics. He was willing to investigate the creatures more closely, since those brought to his care died upon reaching adulthood. And so he decided to settle in an abandoned residence that was supposedly located on a mimic hunting ground. He had set some motion detectors that were connected to a panel with lights. And then he locked himself in the basement bathroom with food for almost a month. And finally, his wait paid off. A mimic had entered the site, or what he hoped to be a mimic. He was moving between rooms, but the researcher's biggest mistake here was to turn on the baby monitor he had settled to listen to the creature. A couple of hours pass, and he decides to see what happened to the mimic. It might have left, and there he decides to open the door, running into an elder mimic slowly crawling towards the basement door. And as much of a fan of mimics that the researcher is, he was not prepared for this situation. It was best to wait a few days until the creature decides to leave. The problem is that the elder mimics are something completely different. They are what happens when a mimic gets enough food. And by the interior appearance of the house, it is theorized that this mimic is the same from the mimic defense tape. Therefore, it is very familiar with human behavior. But this is not what alerted the mimic. Remember that the crow reacted to radio waves? Well, mimics, especially elder mimics, seem to be very sensitive to these radio waves. That is why, when the baby monitor was turned on, the mimic knew exactly where the doctor was and acted accordingly, to get closer to its prey. 9 days pass and the doctor tries to open the door again, only to find him directly in front of it. The next day, the mimic continues to torment him.
Please stop. I can't. Please.
The mimic was huge, and a small gun wasn't going to be enough. It startled it. The creature was hurt, but now was hungry, and the doctor had lost his only window to escape. He only had to wait for help to come, but after 4 weeks no one came for him. Even though he was a Carcass researcher, it seemed like no one was going to risk their life to save him from an elder mimic, or maybe they sent the doctor to his death. Having nothing to lose and running out of supplies, the researcher decides to go for the exit and opens the door to face the creature.
There you are.
Once it's safe to return to the site, other Carcass agents go to recover the doctor's research. They were only able to recover the tape that we saw. The Mimic left nothing recognizable of the researcher, and all his research was seemingly gone. Obviously, someone was interested in keeping secret everything that happened here, and although it's not very clear why. Anyways, this is by far one of the best episodes of the entire series. The props are very well done, seriously, I love how the Elder Mimic looks, but anyways, that's all we have for now. As always, in the description down below, I'll leave you the link to Darian's channel in case you want to check it out. I really appreciate if you leave a like and subscribe, that really helps me and the channel. And leave me a comment on why I should cover next or whatever. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time, someday. Bye bye.